First up on the stage, we'll be talking to Pascal Pewinski, who is CEO at AREVA H2Gen, followed by Jean-Luc Mussot, who's CEO at Ad-Venta. And the last guest will be Julian Etienne, who is business director at Plastic Omnium, a real interesting collection of tech from France. So with no further ado, I welcome my first guest up onto the stage, Pascal Pewinski, who's CEO at AREVA H2Gen. Pascal, you have the stage.
Thank you, Brian. Well, hello everybody. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm Pascal Pewinski. I'm the CEO of AREVA H2Gen. AREVA H2Gen is a French company, and as it is indicated in the name, we are part of AREVA Corporation. We're a manufacturer of electrolyzers, and we manufacture PEM electrolyzers, so electrolyzers using proton exchange membranes. So the first time I joined the Hannover Fair, I think it was in 2011, and we were coming here. We were at that time a 6-people company coming from the R&D, and we were presenting our very first electrolyzer that was a 10 norm cubic meter electrolyzer, PEM electrolyzer, which was already at that time quite an important size, actually. And today, 9 years later, 30 million euros investment later also, €500,000 investment in Germany later, we're presenting now a 60 megawatt PEM electrolysis concept, and we're essentially and mainly involved in building PEM electrolyzers, but in megawatt sizes. Now, one of the particularity of these systems is that, of course, they're very foreseen to serve electrical grids and enable the development of renewable energies. In our developments, we believe that the technology we have developed, the PEM electrolysis technology we have developed, is going to be able to, first of all, produce hydrogen. Because at the end of the day, one thing we all tend to forget is that one who invests in an electrolyzer is, first of all, to produce hydrogen. The fact of servicing the grid with balancing services is, in reality, an added-on functionality, that does not exist today in electrolyzers. But as a French developer, whether in France, but also in Germany, in the UK, and many places in the world, we're developing projects and building equipments in a megawatt size that will enable and that will have the functionalities of capturing curtailed energy. Besides that, we split our market perception in 2 ways. One for industry. And as I said, when I came here the very first time in 2011, we were presenting a 10 norm. And in the meantime, we have sold electrolyzers in China, in Pakistan, in India, in Egypt, in many places, but for very traditional industrial purposes. Now, as I said, 30 million investment is not to serve just an industrial market. It is also because there is a belief behind that hydrogen is going to play a major role in the future energy systems. Hydrogen is going to be also one of the major energies for future electrical mobility. And behind that, we have the motivation of our investors and our investors in the technology brick we are building within the energy transition. We are a 35-people company. We're located in Paris. And of course, we support many projects in France. Now, to tell you a little bit more about what's going on in France, France has been very dynamic these last years on hydrogen technologies. We have developed many fueling station projects around the concept of developing mobility through captive fleets. And since June last year, we have a governmental program, and that governmental program is pretty interesting because it shows also many countries the path of development of hydrogen projects. And the first brick of that development is to develop projects with electrolyzers in order to decarbonize industrial hydrogen. Because we must not forget that the whole hydrogen technologies, the whole hydrogen industry can develop only if it's renewable, only if it's green, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense. Hydrogen from methane steam reforming produces a lot of CO2, 10 and 11 kilos of CO2 per kilos of hydrogen. So if we neglect that point, hydrogen technologies will not emerge if they are not green. And electrolysis, and in particular PEM electrolysis, is one of the hearts of these developments and of these deployments. That is probably also why you might have noticed that in this Hannover Fair, and particularly in this hydrogen area, that has only been expanding tremendously in the last 8 years, the place taken by electrolyzers has become more and more important. We're a French company. We're, I think, the only French manufacturer of electrolyzers, one of the 5 PEM electrolyzer manufacturers in the world. And if you have any questions, you're very welcome, and I'm very pleased to invite you on our booth, and you can present you our products, projects, and what we do.
So thank you. We'll return for the discussion at the end. The next presentation will take place, and then right after that, we'll join each other on the stage. Next up on stage, I welcome Jean-Luc Mussot, who's CEO of Ad-Venta. The famous Jean-Luc.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Okay, so my name is Jean-Luc Mussot. I'm the founder and CEO of Ad-Venta. We are 13 years old now. And we moved into the hydrogen business since more than 10 years. So initially it was like to be a pioneer, but we are very happy to see that it has been growing and growing and growing. So what do? We are, let's say, innovative solution provider for the onboard hydrogen storage. And onboard hydrogen storage, it covers already the application for, let's say, very small power fuel cell, like nomadism. We also provider of solution for light mobility, like bikes. And we are also working on all the link between the tanks and the fuel cell for the automotive sector. And now we're also looking at the solution for drone application, obviously for trucks, bus and trucks. And now the new application which are starting, they are train and boats, and even planes. So it's already a lot of different applications. And when we started with very simple, with ideas. We apply for different patents, and now we made prototypes, and now we are in the phase of producing the products for these different applications. So I would like to talk a little bit about this link between the storage and the fuel cell, because we think that it's also very important and very critical link, because everybody is focusing on fuel cell, which is nice, they have to, and also on focusing on storage, what are the new tanks, the new Type 4 tanks, which is very important as well. But in between, you have this link, And we want to cover that link from the high pressure to the low pressure. So that means from 700 bars to 500 millibars, and to develop new innovative solutions to cover that link. With one motto in mind. It's how to make it simple. Because to make it simple, that means it will be safest and cost-effective. So that's very simple. That's our philosophy, and that's why we develop the different products for the different application. And now, talking about a little bit about France. Well, France, I would say that we were a little bit out, but since 2 to 3 years, there have been a strong move, especially a political move, so that now hydrogen is it's a part of the strategic plan of France as well. So like the other countries, like Germany, or all other countries, or like UK, like all other countries in Europe. And it was the right time, because now you can see that it's moving very fast, especially in Asia. You know that China just announced in 2016 its 13 strategic plan, with a very simple motto as well. It's made in China in 2025. So I guess here we have to wake up. So that's what we do, and so we are supplying our customers with innovative solutions, and we want also to develop partnership to cover all those applications, because obviously we are not able to cover everything. So we are part of a big family. That's it.
So, thank you very much. Next up on stage, before we return, all four of us for a general discussion, is Julian Etienne, who is business director at Plastic Omnium. Julian.
Thank you, Brian. Good afternoon, everybody. So we'll finish the one-person presentation. My name is Julien Etienne. I work for Plastic Omnium. I'm in charge of business and project for new energies. For those who don't know, Plastic Omnium is a family-owned group, major tier one supplier for automotive. We make around 8 billion euro sales last year, 125 plants in 26 countries, 30,000 employees. Quite a large size group. We are active and leaders on body parts, plastic body parts, and fuel systems, fuel tanks basically, made out of plastic. In 2016, our chairman, Mr. Burel, announced that Plastic Omnium was going to join the Hydrogen Council and work on a new type of products for the hydrogen economy. The idea was that we were looking for the next step, actually the next step after battery vehicles, and we adhere to the values that the Hydrogen Council were promoting of a hydrogen society, hydrogen as a factor to promote and support the development of renewable energies. At the same time, hydrogen for mobility is developing, was starting to develop at the time with some vehicles coming on the road. So our idea was to say, okay, we're leaders in the storage of energy in the cars for a combustion engine. We want to keep the status, we want to be the leader of clean mobility in the future. We're going to invest, we're going to develop products that will allow us to cover the whole chain from storage of hydrogen all the way to production of hydrogen through a fuel cell. So how do we do that? How do we get to reach this vision that we have? Short term, as I mentioned, we joined some association. It's very important. Hydrogen right now has been promoted, and the development of hydrogen has been promoted and pushed by different associations. European projects, public funding, demonstrating the technology and helping the technology to become mainstream. So we became part of Hydrogen Council, we became part of Hydrogen Europe, of the AFIPAC in France, and contributed to the development of the technology itself and the promotion of hydrogen and the lobbying. We also created in 2017 a new business unit called Plastic Omnium New Energies, which was the how to say in English? L'agglomération. We took all of these parts that we had working on hydrogen, put them together, acquired a couple of startups, put them in this business unit, and sped up our capacity to go to market, have a product to offer the market, have a team of experts to keep developing the technology and have an offer quicker for hydrogen storage and fuel cell systems. That was the short term. That's the first thing we did. In 2017, we created this business unit. Midterm, right now, we're addressing different markets. Plastic Omnium is a pure player in automotive. We are opening our mind. Today, hydrogen is developing, is getting mature on not automotive segments, but on bus, on trucks, on forklifts, on light commercial vehicles. So we're still dealing with mobility with wheels, but we're opening a little bit the segments, and we're addressing those markets who are becoming mature. The idea is that we keep promoting the technology through applications. We're getting expertise. We're working on making our products safer, more mature, more competitive through volume, to be ready for the big volume that will come, we believe, after 2025 with the passenger car. Then long term, we're applying our technology right now, but we're still working hard on developing research bricks, creating new research center in Europe that will be focused on new technology, keeping developing our capacity in France. So our headquarters and main management team is based in Levallois, next to Paris. And we're also opening a new research and development center in Wuhan, in China, to address the Chinese market. Once again, because if we are not in China, we won't benefit from volume. We won't be able to make the technology competitive in Europe. So we want to make the technology competitive in Europe to get the technology to actually launch. So that's for us. That's the big plan. That's the big plan to be able to support the plan of having over 2 million passenger cars produced that are fuel cell vehicles by 2030. What do we do in France? Very clearly, we are an international company. We have teams all around Europe working on developing this technology in Belgium, in Switzerland, and in France. What we do in France today, which is where we have our biggest development center in the group, is being part of the ecosystem and being part of actually creating the ecosystem. We have the opportunity to be in a situation where the technology is brand new and the market is brand new. We need to push the ecosystem to develop. We need to make sure that the politics understand the importance of this technology so that they put in place the right schemes to promote the technology, to develop the infrastructure, to understand how hydrogen will help them move from historical energies to renewable energies. I think what's happening right now in Germany is very telling. This year, for the first year, I believe you produced more energy, renewable energy, than coal energy. Hydrogen will make this trend become even more sustainable by making renewable energy cheaper and cheaper. today in France, we enjoy nuclear power in a very large scale, but there are some very strong wind and strong push to move to renewable energy. The day people and politics understand the role that hydrogen has to play in that is the day where we're going to have a developing infrastructure, and we're going to be able to push the industrial approach to this techno. So we want to be part of the ecosystem. We're part with my colleagues of the AFIPAC, of Hydrogen Mobility France, and we are pushing the local guys as well as the national guys to buy into the technology. We have been involved for a while in funded projects in Europe, putting on the road some trucks, putting on the sea some boats, getting people to use light commercial vehicle powered by hydrogen, developing some stationary system. We want to keep doing this. At the same time, we want our action to be much more politic and make sure that the decision that Europe and France made to make hydrogen a strategic axis of development keep moving this way. That's it for me. Thank you.
So, thank you. At this point, if I could invite all the gentlemen who've presented with us, well, you can stay where you are, to join me back up on the stage. So much detail, and there's so much hidden in the detail here, and there's so many different ways of talking about things. When we were prepping this talk, I was talking to Julien, and when we think of the value proposition of hydrogen or what the technology provides, you said, well, we have the choice of being a net importer of batteries or a net exporter of fuel cell technology. Could you expand on that a little bit? Because it really is an interesting question. Your market right now is really, by and large, outside of the country. You're an export commodity manufacturer right now. Is that relatively true?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Right now, for Plastic Omnium, most of our, I guess about 75% of our sales are done outside of France. My point earlier on was looking at the opportunity that we have in France, and more generally in Europe, actually, but in France, to develop an ecosystem. So far, the fuel cell technology has been led by what is effectively spin-offs of research centers, university research centers. So, big spin-off, big startup. We have some major companies on the market. But what we see right now with the dynamic that is being created by all of the car manufacturers or trucks manufacturers starting to look properly at hydrogen is the fact that they're expecting their current suppliers, tier 1 suppliers, to get involved. So when Plastic Omnium announces that they're looking at hydrogen, the OEMs listen. And what's interesting is that if you consider the whole of the hydrogen ecosystem, going very upstream from hydrogen production, hydrogen distribution, component manufacturing, system development and manufacturing, you realize that France actually covers most of the value chain. And when you compare this value chain made of French players with it's not the opposite, but it's the alternative value chain of battery electric car, you realize that most of the value that you have in a BEV lies in the battery pack. 40–50% of the value of the car is in the battery pack, and today is outside of France and outside of Europe. From a technological point of view, we can try to catch up the battery industry, but we're quite far behind. From an industrial point of view, we're quite far behind. We can create new capacity, but there is already capacity in Asia. So we have the opportunity to create and to drive and to lead this new technology in France and in Europe, instead of trying to catch up the battery train that is running ahead. And I think this is something that needs to be really realized by Europe, that we have this ecosystem in our hands with major players being ready to invest major money and having the means to do so. I mean, Plastic Omnium has invested so far over €1 million in fuel cell technology. But we have the means to do so and to drive the technology, and it's a huge opportunity for the future.
Again, returning to the value proposition, obviously electrolysis is an improving tech, but the concept is really simple. Splitting water, you need a source of electricity, and that's only one potential source of hydrogen. As we all know, most hydrogen is reformed natural gas. When I talk about the value proposition of this technology, and you're absolutely right, electrolysis is the booming industry on the fair. It has now occupied at least a third of the space here. If I go back 10 years, I was here 10 years ago, it was a very small player. So this has become fundamentally important. For me, what is interesting is the hydrogen fuel cell industry can parse the numbers differently. That is, you could use natural gas, which is, let's face it, not the worst form of hydrocarbon. You can reform that natural gas and run it through a fuel cell, and you still get an increase of 30% of efficiency. Now, there's a market for your fuel cells, okay? That is, it's interesting that there's a number of ways to jumpstart the hydrogen and fuel cell economy. The more fuel cells on the road, the more likely it is that electrolysis is going to be a good source locally, for example. But for me, the interesting thing is your value proposition is parsed differently within France. I heard something from you that I've never heard from another electrolysis manufacturer, that is your first take on that issue, and it is really the question of the bang per buck. Who's paying more for hydrogen? And your philosophy is the decarbonization
of industrial applications. Yes, well, as I mentioned when I came here in 2011, I think it's 8 years ago now. It was my first year working in the hydrogen industry, and coming here was extremely dynamizing in the way that it was the first time I could see a fuel cell car driving on the parking lot, and it was not just a fuel cell car, just as a demonstrator with a beautiful woman sitting on the okay, you could really sit behind the steering wheel and go and drive with it. Okay, and so my first impression at these times was, hydrogen technologies are far more mature than one would believe. First step, we must show it works, wherever the hydrogen comes from. Let's make projects, let's make mobility projects and show the world that the technology works, that the technology is mature, it is mastered, and if you give your driver's license out there, you can drive a fuel cell car. It's not, you don't need to be an engineer or a doctor to do that. But, because there's a but in there, and I think the French state has shown a path last year with a plan called by the name of the minister who presented it, which is the Hulot plan. That starts with, okay, technology is mature, we're showing demonstrators, mobility, this is all good and fine, but all this economy only makes sense if the hydrogen is green. Otherwise, nothing is going to happen, neither on the fuel cells, any equipments, and even less on the electrolyzers. And I think that the Hulot plan really identified the steps in which we have to do things so that this economy has a chance to emerge. And the very first step is to show how am I able to produce green hydrogen and with a target of decarbonizing industrial uses of hydrogen by making it a business and making it a business that is competitive. Okay? And this is one of the great challenges, because if we achieve that challenge, all the rest is going to fly from its own.
That's for sure.
Just wondering whether you agree, all costs drop with volume, of course, and everyone's waiting for the mass production of fuel cell cars, which start with infrastructure. It starts with forklift trucks. We all know it because they're operating business models right now. So, Jean-Luc, where do you see growth potential right now for your business model? And of course, you market products across the board, but you also do fuel cells.
Yeah, well, as I said, well, obviously we have, let's say, an advantage. As Julien said, we have the technological background for the hydrogen fuel cell here in Europe. We have the knowledge, we have the R&D centers, we have been doing a lot of things. So technology is mature, that's for sure. And now the market is coming. And it's coming in Europe, but it's now the main area where it's going to grow is Asia. So obviously Japan is the first country to have put hydrogen as a strategic plan, and now it's followed by Korea, and new player is China. And as we said, we need also to, they have a plan, it's made in China, so we need to see what we are going to do here in Europe, because we have the technological advantage, but we know also the market will be there. So we have to figure out how to work, and it's a very huge potential there.
It's interesting that we're all sitting here under the auspices, sort of under the umbrella organization of Business France, because Business France is not a charitable organization. You guys are not an R&D with your hands out saying, you know, can you loan us a few bucks? Business France profiles business companies with commercial prospects. And on that note, what is the environment like in France specifically? And there's a number of ways of thinking about the environment in France for the fuel cell industry. That is, the resources provided by intellectual know-how, beginning with universities and R&D. Then there is the market prospects within the country. That is, if you're a electrolyzer manufacturer, there may be a market outside the country, and I'm sure there is. What is the market prospect right now in France? And then the next step is you're manufacturing export commodities. So what support is there to develop that business model in France and go beyond? If we could start with you, Jean-Luc, because you mentioned R&D. Is the environment good for the development of fuel cell technologies in France?
Yeah, for that, I would say that in France we have a very good environment for that, because we have strong R&D partners like CEA, CNRS, well, a lot of knowledge. And now we move into the founding project in France. There have been quite few. And I would say that now we are just in let's say, a transition. And now we can see there is really a structuration. We can see that the big players are coming, like the T1. A lot of them are now moving very fast because they see the market, they see that they have to go, and now they're coming. So we are just in this transitional period. I can see that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And of course, business is booming. Part of the function of our fair here is to provide acceptance for the technology. And we were talking about that. Of course, you, Julien, you're involved in storage. And people always think of the most horrific Hindenburg scenarios when they think about hydrogen. If you were driving a car, would you rather be rear-ended by someone while you're driving a gas car, or would you rather be rear-ended when you're driving a fuel cell car? Where would you feel safer?
Okay, so that's a... Can you hear me? Yeah. Keeping in mind Plastic Omnium is the biggest manufacturer of traditional gas tank. That's a bit of a trick question, but I would say the way the hydrogen storage is designed and certified and tested today, I would say that if you have a crash in a hydrogen car, the component that is the most likely not to be damaged is the tank, is the hydrogen tank. I think we need to explain, we need to promote to the general public and to explain to the general public what the technology is about and how safe it is, or how dangerous it is, if it is dangerous. But I think we need to be fair and open and say things like they are. We tried to do that during the Mondial de l'Automobile, the car show in Paris, trying to really involve the general public, saying, okay, you know, guys, this is how it is. In order to validate this tank, we shoot into it with an automatic weapon, with a Kalashnikov, basically. And it needs to behave in a certain way, so that it's safe. In order to make sure that it doesn't explode, we submit it to a pressure that is about the equivalent of the pressure you have 1.5 kilometers under the water, which is extreme, which nothing would withstand in a car, in a normal car. But the tanks, the hydrogen tanks, are designed and validated in order to withstand this kind of pressure. So, yes, we're talking about hydrogen. Hydrogen, by the way, is the most common element in the universe. Huh? So it's not particularly toxic or dangerous. But we're talking about hydrogen, we're talking about high pressure. Yes, it can look dangerous, but at the end of the day, we're designing, it's good engineering, basically. We're designing systems so that they will work and perform in this way. People tell me, oh, it's dangerous to fill up with hydrogen. And I say, but would you be happy to fill up with a water gun that spits highly flammable liquid? People say, say, that's what you do every day. You go and fill your car with gasoline. That's what it is. You need acceptance for the technology. And that's exactly what we said. We need to show that the technology is here. We need people to touch it and to understand what it's all about. Once the acceptance is here, then it's not just about policies pushing for the technology, but it's also for the general public pulling the technology and making it more acceptable and being ready to actually buy into it.
Pascal mentioned driving a car as being sort of that moment where it clicked, where you realize the technology is mature and it's fun. Acceptance has many sides to it, of course. One of the sides that we think about in Berlin is there are statistics generated that indicate your likelihood of getting some form of cancer simply because you're living next door to a street with a lot of traffic. We're almost out of time here, but the big question here is there's a number of ways of parsing the good business environment in France for the industry. But one of the questions, and during the prep talk, someone mentioned the mayor of Paris, is the environmental policies. If briefly, all of you, gentlemen, could comment on anything that's happening in terms of environmental policies that is making this a viable technology. If we could start with you, Pascal.
Yeah, well, the mayor of Paris has banned the diesel cars by 2024 inside the city, wow. inside the boundaries of the city of Paris. Mm-hmm. So you must imagine that, of course, in Paris there's a taxi fleet of hydrogen cars that is called Hype, that has these blue colors, as supported also by Air Liquide, mm-hmm. And there are 100 fuel cell taxis driving in Paris. Now, banning diesel cars by 2024 brings up a major issue, in particular, because we have a very good public transportation network. Mm-hmm. Okay, if we have hydrogen taxis, but for the last kilometer of delivery trucks, etc. Mm-hmm. So many logistic companies involved in the last delivery are really getting concerned because they're looking, oh, but what is the alternative offer for us to do our jobs and to deliver restaurants, shops, etc. with all these goods. So we see hydrogen, and hydrogen is playing a role in there because we see hydrogen projects popping up in order to have an offer and enable the excluding of diesel cars within the boundaries of Paris.
And Jean-Luc, that's a market for your technology, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Well, what it was also interesting, it was the approach that started in France to develop the fleet of of cars or small delivery cars, because it's also a good way to start to show that, to demonstrate that it works, and also to grow the application. That was start with Symbio, and it was a good plan, because you start initially with a fleet, and you put a refilling station, then you put an electrolyzer, and then you grow that's a very good idea, and obviously that's a good market for us as well, but for everybody. I mean, we could mention that we have all the value proposition for all the chain in France. That's also very important. You can cover for to the production, distribution, filling in the car, using the car, etc., etc. And even not only the car, but now the bikes, because we have also a good player called Pragma in France, making the bikes, and now we are talking about trains and bus and trucks, obviously, as well.
I think it's interesting. 2 years ago, up on stage, I was talking to a representative of Bourgogne-Franche-Comté, and they were famous up until then for cheese and wine. And people do not often associate. Now they have a brochure around the corner, it's available. They say the development of the hydrogen sector is one of the region's strategic goals. I think we all should thank Business France for organizing this event, because in fact, France as a source of hydrogen technology, as a manufacturer, as a market for hydrogen technology, and also as an exporter of hydrogen technology, it's underrepresented in our minds. It's always been there, but it's underrepresented. So it's been a very informative talk. We're out of time now, but the conversation is going to continue with refreshments just around the corner here. I have been talking to Pascal Pewinski, who's CEO at AREVA H2Gen, and we'll be doing an elevator pitch with your technology on Wednesday. Ad-Venta, represented by Jean-Luc Mussot, CEO, and in the middle, Plastic Omnium, Julian Etienne, who's business development there. Thank you very much, and please join us. All the audience is welcome to join us around the corner here. The booth is B70, and the booth for all of these gentlemen, with the exception of AREVA's booth, is C53 there. Please join us for a drink. It's around the corner here. And thank you all for being here, and hope to see you back next year.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
So, thanks.